Welcome to Full Metal RPG. I'm your host. No, we're not. No, there are no hosts on this show anymore. What am I talking about? I'm Richie Buzzkill. I'm here today we're going to talk about the ups and downs of using miniatures in RPGs with my pal, my friend from across the pond, Rob. Rob, there was one burning question that I need you to answer.
Okay.
What have you done with Brendan?
I didn't burn him. I promise you that. I didn't burn him.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
He is alive. Brendan Carrion is alive. That is as far as I'm willing to confirm at this point. That is it. He is well. He sends his regards. He's been treated well. He's fine. If you see a video of him and he's blinking an SOS code out, ignore it. He's absolutely fine. I promise you. But he is not on fire. He is fine.
He's not on fire.
He's not on fire. I can confirm that to you.
But he is doing a show with you.
He is doing a show with me.
Or is that a simulacrum? Or are you using a simulacrum of Brendan?
It's a glove puppet.
Oh.
To be honest, because you can't see us, it's an audio-only podcast, I just sort of go, it's really in Arizona. And, that's it. It's the same thing, but I've got a little glove puppet, which you don't normally see.
Right. Oh, so our good friend Alex, our puppet making friend Alex he's down in London making puppets. Oh. So you clearly have engaged one of our patrons in getting a fine hand puppet of Brendan, which Alex, I know you're going to listen to this eventually. If we could just see that at some point. I know you're working on your some Warhammer thing or another as well, but get that, put that on the list and I will pay you money. Anyways.
Fullmetalrpg, but everyone's a puppet. It's like Muppet Christmas Carol. Everyone but Buzzkill is a puppet. You're the Michael Caine.
What? That would be amazing. I would. I think if the patrons want it, we can add it as a goal. I would pay good money to see that myself. So that's a fantastic idea, Rob. Rob always has fantastic ideas.
Yeah.
But he's also obsessed with Warhammer, which is what the Realm of Fire is about. So all of the Warhammers,
all of them.
But that also includes the miniatures, right? Not just the role-playing games, because you love the Warhammer role-playing games, but also the miniatures. Today we're going to talk about using miniatures in role-playing games. That's why I thought of my good friend from across the pond.
I love that.
So forever and a day, I was mostly a theater of mind person.
Yes, okay.
And that's mostly because I didn't paint miniatures.
Sure, I can see that. Yeah.
So, and then I got a little bit of a taste of it, and this is an entirely different subject, but it's connected with the virtual tabletops we all started. I started doing 5 or 6 years ago, and then really started doing 2 years ago. So, but I've always drawn a room on a piece of paper and just like used Pente beads and pennies to like move around because it's just so much easier to do that.
Yeah.
RPGs started with miniatures.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where are we at with where are you at with miniatures and role? Yeah.
Personally, funny because when you raised the topic with me, I thought, well, I don't use miniatures in RPGs. I'm a theatre of the mind person. I very rarely use maps. I very rarely, if I'm using virtual tabletops, I don't use them. If I'm playing online, it's faces looking at each other. However, every time I have used miniatures, I thought, well, this is much easier. Every time I've actually just taken that moment, just rather than saying, okay, you're in a Western bar, and you're at the bar, the outlaws have come in, you know what you're going to do, is there a table in front of me? Yeah, okay. Rather than have that discussion, the times I've gone, all right, do you know what, I'll just draw out a little bar saloon, as you say, put a few meeples down from board games, I thought, well, this is much better. This is much better. This is an aid that works. But I've yet to fully incorporate it. I think And the question is being, where am I with this now? When I go back to face-to-face gaming, which is hopefully beginning very, very soon, I'm going to I'm going to go big on the miniature side. I actually think having those there does give you something. It's the physicality. I think we've had 2 years of virtual reality, and it's
Yes.
not as good as we were promised in the Lawnmower Man. So it's been very no cards, and yeah, you've got dice, but also you can just type 2D12 into Google in it and other search engines, and it comes up. Those physical elements are missing now for me, and miniatures are a part of that. I would love now, even if you don't use it in a game, to sit down at a table and have a little, 28mm to 35 heroic scale figure next to you does help. It gives you something to look at in between turns while you're waiting for the fighter to do their 20 sword swings.
Or the wizard for doing their 3 spells or whatever it is.
Yeah, and you're the rogue and you've gone, oh. You've got your little miniature to look at and go, cool. It keeps you, they act as little prompts, almost, I think. Even if you don't use them technically, they're act as prompts. They're on the table. They're there. It's that, that moment in a film, like when they've got the magical chess pieces, or, that kind of real trope. Jason the Argonauts, where the gods are moving the pieces about and they come to life and stuff. Sorry, the clashes. Just put that away. It gives you that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of where I've kind of come to a little bit myself. And now we have both kind of, especially I have kind of turned to painting. It's something I started a few years ago as kind of like a Zen hobby. I wasn't really playing games with them. I was just like, I stare at a computer screen 10 to 12 hours a day. I need to do something where I'm not doing that to just kind of like settle my brain in. But when I started doing that, I got the Castle Ravenloft board game.
Yeah.
There was a 4E, but a little late in 4E, the Castle Ravenloft board game. And I decided I'm going to paint up that set. So I painted up that set and I made a little foam holder for it. And then, and longtime listeners will know that I kind of have like this like little con with my friends. We just go rent a couple hotel rooms or a house or something, and we go and hang out and we play role-playing games all weekend. Well, I decided it was like, well, not normally running D&D or whatever, but I was like, I have all these miniatures. So I go and I bring this box, I lug this box from here to Tampa or Atlanta or something in my suitcase, taking up 3/4 of my suitcase, and decide. And I think it really helped because, especially in those tactical games, right?
Yeah.
They're set up in such a way that I think it really helps, even if you have just the little pennies and whatever. But when it's got that painted miniature on the table, it really does change your kind of perception. And I think there's a downside to that, but I want to, the downside is that it limits imagination sometimes. I think that's, to me, that's what the counter argument to all this is and this is the argument that I've made for years and years, is it limits me, right?
Yeah.
And I actually think it might be the grid that's limiting and not the miniatures, but that's to you, sir.
Yeah. I brought this as well because I see the setups where people have got a table, they've got all their dungeon terrain out, and they've got a port that they've made, and I think that's really cool. You know what? You've got a 12-foot table full of this stuff. You look at these premium D&D players who've got everything there. I'm only half on D&D because that's all I can think of at the moment. But then I look at that and think, that's cool and all, but what if your players say, oh, but we want to go to the desert? What do you do then? Do you pull it all down? Do you go, right, go out the room, I'm just going to pull all this terrain down?
Yeah.
Bring the desert?
Yeah, you almost have to set up the date for that. Like, if you're going that far, right, you have to... Yeah. I think there's like an in-between state that is better. like
Yeah.
the Dwarven Forge ideal, right, is too much. Way too much. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Like if you're running a con game with Dwarven Forge where you're like, no, this is Battle Dungeon. All heroes start here, here, here. We're running this same dungeon all weekend. You guys are coming to play that. Cool. But if we're just playing a casual game and they're like, oh yeah, we're not going to go to that dungeon that you've been laying the seeds for, or we're not going to the bar. That bar is, we're not going to go to that bar where clearly it's a trap, right? Yeah. Hey, players, I'm going to talk to players for a second. Players, yes, the GM is laying a trap for you, but for a reason, okay? Please fall into more GM traps. It will help everyone everywhere, all day, every day, okay? It's important to know it's a trap. Even say, look, this is clearly a trap, but we have to go.
Yeah.
But I understand agency. I really do.
Yeah. And imagine a horror film where they just drive away. You've got no film. And adventures are the same. I know this is a little bit off topic.
Yeah.
Go with the story. Don't acknowledge also I'm going to do a camera piece here and then we'll go back to the miniatures. As a player, never say, well, we better do this plot device or there's going to be no adventure tonight, because the GM will look at you just like, shut up. Why? Yeah, it's a game, it's not real. That's fine. You can also press stop on a DVD, and stop the film if you want to. Don't acknowledge it. It is a game. Just enjoy it. Just go with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of prep, especially when you get into miniatures, right? And building dungeons. There's a lot of prep from the GM, and we got a good question. We got some good prompts from our patrons here that really go into this. So I'm going to let that point go, but it does give you this sense that you're doing something more grand than. But to me, GMs lay up the rules a little bit more, lay aside the rules a little bit more during miniature combat. Because that to me is like when it starts to break down is when we're like, okay, I'm counting 6 squares and then I'm going to do a thing. Right. But me as a monk, I want to be able to run down the hallway, run up the wall, do a flip kick off the ceiling. Yes, I'm only moving 6 squares and then I'm kicking a guy, right? But I'm going to describe it so that's where.
And I think miniatures, to go back to the whole limiting but also helping imagination, my ideal setup is you have miniatures for the players, each of whom brought their own. We'll get onto that in a minute.
We'll get onto that, yeah.
You have miniatures for the enemies, and actually in this case, I don't think it's as important to have perfect miniatures for everybody, because you don't know what you're going to roll on the Wandering Monster chart.
Right.
Honestly, I think if you had a set of 10 red meeples and 5 dark red meeples, you could go, okay, in this room it's 10 goblins and 5 orcs. Like you can just do that little differential, and they could just be generic meeples, and then in the next room it's 5 bugbears and 5 evil wizards. But that's just a thing off, But as long as you can see them, that helps.
Yeah, I don't expect the bad guys to be lovingly painted. It's always lovely if they are, right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If you just go and buy like the 3 D&D box sets that have the rubber miniatures in them, you have more than enough to like cover most encounters. Or just, I have a 3D printer. We could just put like bullet points of each one of my hobbies we're talking about, like down the side of the screen, like on the side of an aircraft or something. But, yes, there's all these Patreons that have like, oh, you get an entire campaign book and miniatures with it you can print out. There's some extremes to go to, but really, if you just use the same meeples or pawns or whatever, but the player characters really should be nicely detailed.
And I think that on a map is enough for me. I don't need 3D terrain. I play Warhammer. I play 40k. And I have the terrain. In some cases, it crosses over. I play a lot of Soulbound, for example. That's one of my major games. Therefore, I have a lot of Age of Sigmar stuff. That's great. However, I also play a lot of Numenera. I don't have Numenera terrain because that would be insane. But the map drawn out, fine, absolutely fine. So the miniatures are there to give you a prompt. They help you figure out where you are on the map. But I don't expect the full Dwarven Forge thing because that is when it starts limiting, I believe.
Well, it's sort of hard to even use a miniature inside of a wall-off dungeon. Yeah. Like, it's hard to reach it. Yeah. So, like, I would personally prefer to not be on grids.
Yes, agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
I would much rather take a whiteboard that has nothing on it and just draw the area. It doesn't have to be to scale.
Yeah.
Roughly in the size. You can be kind of like a little freehand and be like, oh no, it's clearly bigger than that once you put the miniature. It's like, it's over here. Like, just enough to kind of set the stage. Like, we always end up drawing on a piece of 8.5 by 11 or A1 size paper, or not A1, A4. Ha! I got it.
You got it.
We always end up drawing on that kind of paper, like what the area looks like anyway. So why not have like a relatively large whiteboard, a medium-sized whiteboard that you can just lay on the table and be like, and then you can like erase it and be like, oh no, there's a broken wall. Oh no, there's,
And then your players say we want to go to the desert. You can say, cool. I'll draw an oasis, and now you're in the desert. I'm 100% of that. I'm a big zone guy.
Yeah.
So Soulbound, I love the combating because it's all zones. I do think getting away from grids is important because the miniatures should be a game aid. They shouldn't be the game. If you want to play a miniatures game, hit me up on Discord. I will tell you how many skirmish tactical miniatures games there are, because you'll have more. If you are down to wanting to count squares, and there's nothing wrong with that, there are better systems than D&D, than Morkborg, than Soulbound. There are better games designed for that. They should be an aid for the roleplay game. And with the zones, you do that because it is just a case of, to go back to the Western bar, you've got the drinking bit, the bar, the stairs, and the balcony above. You just draw out those zones, and you can then just say, okay, I'm going to run up the stairs to the balcony above. You don't need to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know where you are at that point for when the guys come in next. And that's the flexibility in miniatures. It solidifies this imagined scene without, if you go too far, you've made the scene in front of you, and it's a model railway, and now you're playing on a model railway. And it's too much. It is too much.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, Fate is a good example of this. They're doing near far as kind of like it's all built into the system. I like that much more because I want to be able to jump over the railing, do something dumb, and then then have somebody else fall on me. Like, it should be dynamic. Combat should be dynamic, and that's what RPGs allow, right? When you go full. But sometimes that dynamism is confusing. Like, when you have a dynamic system, it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, you want to limit a certain amount of chaos, right? But too much and everybody's confused, and too little and it's really boring, right? So there's like a sweet spot there. So
yeah, there really is, and that is spot on, because the problem with theatre of the mind is everyone's got a different mind. So you can sit for 20 minutes and describe a cave, but someone won't listen at one point and then say, "Oh, sorry, did you say there was a stalactite there?" And you're like, I can't remember now. And immediately you've got a problem there, because they were hide behind the stalactite and throw a rock.
Right, it's a modern game. And the modern game, you're describing a high school, right?
Yeah.
Everyone around the table is thinking of their high school. They're not thinking of the high school you're describing, almost invariably. And then there will become a point when it will become a problem.
Because they'll say, you're in the canteen and there's tables. And so someone will say, all right, I pick up one of the tables and start rolling it Indiana Jones style. In your head, the tables are square picnic benches.
Right.
And if you have to go down to that level of the tables are picnic benches, then, oh my God, you're playing a home decorating game.
Right. It gets everybody on the same if you draw the square table, it gets everybody exactly on the same page, right?
Yeah.
But I also think it would be cooler just to let them roll the table because it's more fun. More fun. But
yeah, absolutely. If the players come up with a good plan, GMs, let them do it.
Yeah.
Roll the dice to see how well they do it. But if they come up with a good plan, let them do it. It might not go very far, or it might cover them the whole way.
Yeah. No, if it fits within the tone of the game that you're trying to kind of negotiate, just roll some dice and see what happens. That's the essence of this entire thing anyways. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the key to miniatures, and we're going to keep coming back to this, is they're an aid. They really are an aid to the game. They're not the game. There are miniatures games.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said, like that Ravenloft box set is a miniatures game, but it's essentially the combat portion of 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons put in a box. And when you realize that Dungeons and Dragons, and this is one of the things I think a lot of people rebel against, a lot of our fans that like D&D is the worst. And for some it is because it limits the imagination and you want this like very grim, real, but also kind of like interesting world. You don't get that with the kind of how many rules do I have for grappling? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Oh God, right, okay.
So having one of those, like having just kind of like some aid there, and just go like, okay, no one is like. We've all agreed that we're kind of doing a bit of loose and fast on these kind of rules that are like heavily into this. And if we all agree to that, I think it's going to be a hell of a good time. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And you can make a little event of it. I don't want to do that. I feel like I've done down a bit on these GMs are putting a lot of effort to create these mega tables because they're incredibly impressive. They really are.
Oh, yes.
But I always think back. The image that sticks with me is Dave Arneson's Blackmore board. So Dave Arneson, don't think I need to introduce him on this podcast, but with Gygax, created D&D, created proto D&D, and his table was a ping pong table. So table tennis table, two big green boards effectively, with chalk lines drawn on it. What we would sort of recognise as maybe toy wooden blocks for houses and buildings, and then lead miniatures. And I look at that and I think, yeah, that's brilliant. That can cover everything. That is the entire realm of Blackmore on one table.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think they were saying about a lot of the early monsters were all just dollar store or pound store rubber figures that they bought that made no freaking sense. Yeah. Like the rust monster was probably some sort of like
it's
cockroach,
kaiju, isn't it, or something? Like a cockroach kaiju from a space alien bag or something crazy.
What does it do? Eat your armor. Like like go to the pound store, go to the dollar store, and just pick up some rubber stuff to throw on the table. Like,
absolutely,
it'd be a lot. It's a lot of fun. The less sense the miniature makes, the more you can project upon it.
Yes, and I think this is important. As to go back to the miniature side of it, if you're getting into miniatures, the first thing you should do is not go on Instagram and look at other people's miniatures.
Yeah, absolutely. Do not.
Just don't. Because there are people who are professional, but hobbyists look at it and go, oh, God, well, I'll never paint like that, so I won't try. I will never play football as well as Lionel Messi, but I'm still going to kick a ball around the park. It's fine. You won't be that good. And you don't have to be that good. If you're going to get into it, get something that you like the look of, put it on a base, put it on the table, don't paint it, just look at it for a bit. Because I used to play with unpainted miniatures all the time. And that in itself is fun. I mean, if you want to, maybe spray it metal if they're covered in armour. That will be enough. Don't think, particularly for RPGs, you need to have some wonderful Games Workshop in-house studio level painted miniature. You don't. Dave Arneson used to have dinosaurs with plasticine wings sculpted on the back for dragons. They look brilliant. They look more charming than a plastic kit ever will. It's to second reference of Jason the Argonauts in one thing. It's the equivalent of the stop motion versus the CGI.
Right.
Yeah, the CGI technically looks better, but there's the charm of the stop motion, and that's the same with miniatures. Something that you put a bit of time into, or even you haven't, you've assembled it and put it down on the table, but it's yours and you love it, will always be better than, some professional thing that someone never actually plays with. It just sits on a shelf. Honestly, don't chase after other people's miniature hobby.
Yeah. And to me, like all hobbies, the more you do it, the better you're going to be, no matter what, really. I mean, everybody hits a limit at certain points, but just if you're going to do any painting, just put brush in to paint and just put it on there, and just do not, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Okay.
Yeah.
And just have fun with it if you're going to do it. Otherwise, just throw whatever you got, go into your kid's room, scoop up an armful of random garbage they're not going to miss, go put it on a table, and you're going to have a lot of fun. Yeah, if you try to go too far, it's going to suck.
Agreed. If you could go get a set of those army men, the army men that everyone has, the 1950s US Army dudes, kind of thing. Bag it down, pick one each for your characters, go to the other side of the store, pick up a load of plastic dinosaurs, get a big bit of paper, draw out a map. That's your game. That's great fun. Right there, that's an RPG adventure. Pull a rule set off the shelf, something easy, and you've got soldiers versus dinosaurs in a 50s B movie game. That's a Savage Worlds game, and you've got those little things to spark your imagination. That's a game right now. I want to play that right now.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That's the thing is, like, especially if you get from non-traditional sources, you can get some much more interesting, like, concepts if you really wanted to lean into whatever those are, right? Yeah. You can still play you could still play like Delta Green with your army men and dinosaurs. Actually, that'd be perfect. But I meant, like, you can play D&D with your army men and dinosaurs. Like, it's fine. Like, you could even spray the fighter like silver or whatever, or like, the wizard's blue, like, whatever you're going to do.
What then starts happening is you will go to a shop and you'll have a look at some miniature range that you've never looked at before, and you'll say, that's cool, I could use that in a D&D adventure. And from the miniature, you start sparking RPG ideas because you think, it'd be really cool. So say you look at the now seemingly defunct miniature game War Machine. I'm sure it still goes, I'm not sure though. That is a very specific miniature rule set. I've got some cool big robots. You might look at one and go, that would make a brilliant golem in D&D.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm going to do for the next D&D adventure. And from that miniature, you've sparked imagination. Your players will spark imagination from it. It's an artifact that, as to go back to the very beginning, is that physicality that you just look at it and go, oh yeah, I want to do something with it now. It's like a good bit of art, but you can hold it and manipulate it and make it yours.
Absolutely. And I think it's maybe time to talk about our Patreon prompts.
I think so.
I
absolutely think so.
Yeah. So I'm going to, our patrons keep me, because I'm running the show now, keep me honest and moving and motivated, because they're so good. When I asked them a question, because I dropped this just miniatures and RPGs, and they gave me 4 or 5 answers in the secret Discord channel that they're only allowed in, and I think let's go with the first one from Mike, or AKA Realm of Garbage Juice.
Great name.
Great name. Should the G.I. Joe RPG have been designed for action figures instead of miniatures?
Oh, that's a good question. I think yes. I'm going to tell you why I think yes, because actually I think it could have had its own combat system where players and the GMs both have to hold their action figures up and then push them against each other as far as they can.
And see what parts fly off?
Yeah, and then if once one hurts their fingers, they lose. I think I think that's a really good idea. Actually, I think, again, like zones, putting those down would be great. If you could definitely, it should have been. I'd say with the Power Rangers one,
I think it should have been, but sort of pointless, because G.I. Joe is the most pacifist show ever, because no one dies, no one gets hit, and it just kind of like they're shooting past each other. But to really answer, to not just make a joke of this, I think he's right, because nostalgia is a hell of a drug. They could have just gone and gotten the cheap. You can still get 3 3/4 miniature action figures from every pound shop. You can get the little vehicles. You could do the whole thing up. I think if you're a GM, you want to run the G.I. Joe miniatures game or something like that G.I. Joe idea, or Freedom Force or some of these other Savage Worlds ones. Just go get a bunch of 3 3/4 action figures and have a hell of a time, because they're already painted. They're already painted out of the box. You can just take the vehicles and put them down. Like there's really no downside to this idea. I know it's a joke, Mike, but it's a really great idea.
And Star Wars, of course. You know,
you've got
all those Star Wars figures. Firstly, take them out of the packets, play with them, they're toys. Rip them out of the packets, and then put them down. Because how cool would that be? Imagine playing the West End Games D6 Star Wars with the Kenner toys. You'd just be like, this is so cool.
I guarantee you pull that stunt at a con, you're going to have like people just standing around, like looking at this, like one going, can I play? Can I was just play. 100%. It just like the end of Boba Fett. It was like somebody's backyard battle came to life in the streets of Mos Espa. Like if you just did that, like, yes, you would need at least.
Toy. Yeah, they got their Boba Fett toy and they banged it, and they're like, right, riding it.
I've got this off-brand sci-fi tank, and I'm going to take my Rancor and just like beat them together. Like, I think you could just use a relatively light system like Savage Worlds and do that with because Savage Worlds does kind of a zone thing, anyways. It's kind of a hybrid system. Yeah. I would be down. You need like 10 stormtroopers. Like,
It's so cool. Yeah, no, I think that's a genuinely good idea. Because again, absolutely. Why not? Why not? Yeah, Mike, in fact, Mike, you now have to do that. You put this as a bit. You now have to do it.
Yeah, sorry, you said too good an idea. Clearly, we need to see progress on this idea. Run it at PAX East or whatever next con you're going to.
Agreed.
Now, Mike Marines, the homie Mike Marines, who has been is a local Arizona guy. He says opinions on players who believe that it's the GM's responsibility only to provide all the miniatures, but also paint them as well.
So painting, not a chance. No. However, here's the thing. As a GM, you want to pull surprises, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So if you say to your players, could one of you go out and buy a box of orcs for me tomorrow? You know there's going to be orcs in the next scenario.
Right.
No one wants that, right? I think the best way to deal with this, and this is how you can also very quickly break up a gaming group, is if you're going to be using miniatures, and it's not already part of someone's hobby. So, for example, as mentioned earlier, I have a lot of Warhammer figures. I ain't going to run Soulbound. And that's fine. I will provide the miniatures. I've already got them. If you as a group are playing D&D, one day one of you says, or you all say, we should use miniatures for a little fund. Your group should become almost like a gaming club. You each chip in $10 each. You've got $50 there. The GM then goes out and buys them because they want to pull the surprise. Of course, there's going to be trust here, but if you're playing RPGs with people you don't trust, get a different hobby or a different group.
Get a different group.
Get a different group, yeah. Let them go get them under the, you do all own them, but if you want that surprise and you want that fun, do it. Just fund it together and you'll have a better time. And then you'll have these things. When your group breaks up because two of you get a job in a different state, or, you've got to move, you can take some of them with you then, and you've got those as physical memories then. It's a nice little thing. RPGs were best when you were like 10 to 11 years old, right? When you've got that kind of spark of imagination. Miniatures take you back to that place, and anything that helps with that is good for RPG. So I would say the GM can provide them, but everyone should fund them. Just as everyone should buy a player's handbook, just as everyone should buy the rules. I'm a strong believer in that because as a proper GM, I'm a lot poorer than my players. But that's on me. I buy a core book just to read. But if I want to play a game, I expect my players to also have the books because it costs, But that's just on me. That's so I think miniatures provide but they might facilitate the buying of painting. No, if the GM paints them, by spray canning them, that's done. Be thankful.
Yeah, to me, I think you're right. I think if that's, this is part of that session 0 discussion, I think it should be, right? Is, hey, do we want to do this? If you don't have the stuff already, then discuss, like you're going to be talking about money anyways, because you're going to be like ordering pizza or something every time you play. It's just how this works. Like, you're going to have a meal. It's just part of the hobby most of the time when you're in somebody's home and you're playing after work on the weekends, which is when most of us play. I think that, especially for player characters miniatures, I mean, I have some that people could use, but I think you should get your own if you're a player. Like, for the PC, like, there's something special about picking out. Like, I will bring a set with me just because, like, if I'm going to, then I can be like, oh, I'm going to play this guy this time, right? But I have those already. The players shouldn't feel any, I mean, I would want to paint it, but like, if you don't want to paint it, like, give it a try. But I think the players should have to at least contribute from their end a miniature they want to use for their, and if they can't, or you want to, it's all negotiation. Everything in RPGs is negotiation. But I also don't think the GM should have to paint everything, because that is just so much work. As someone that has, I don't know, probably another 200 orcs in his closet to paint. I do not need that. I'm sorry. Absolutely. I'm sorry. If that's what you believe, then maybe you should go find someone that does that. Like,
and painting is expensive. Paints cost money. Good brushes cost money. It's a hidden cost, but it's a cost.
Yeah.
If you want good highlighting on a figure, you're looking at a base color, a shade color, and a highlight color. You're looking at $10 worth of paint there. And that's for the flesh. That's one color on that.
Right. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. Like, doing one miniature can take, you can do it in 10 minutes, but you can also take hours and hours and hours. And depending on it, comment about never looking at Instagram miniatures. Right. But I think that, to me, it should be a negotiation. If that's your belief, then I'm sorry. Move along.
It would be a sadistic, a masochistic, GM who wants to collect all the monsters of Undermountain and get them painted ready for your game of D&D.
Right, exactly. Alex GB, who is a puppet maker. I mean, he's talking about using miniatures, add immersion. We could sort of talked about this a little bit, or take away from it. It's a pretty good case for either. So
I think that was the majority of our topic, was adding or taking away. I think, as you said, sweet spot between showing what's happening and dictating what's happening. I think there's a sweet spot that miniatures can fill between it, where it's sequencing and you can work it out. Too much, you take away. Too little, and it's a bit confusing. So I think that was the majority of our topic there.
Right. And I think you can go too far, but I think there is something that can add. So, Patrick, the DM, and to piggyback on that thought, is the approach from different systems matter with miniatures? Do you approach different systems and different with miniatures differently?
It's a really good question. I think yes, because I think there are some systems that I just can't see the need for miniatures. Also, I think there's systems where miniatures would almost take it away, a lot of the joy away. And the one that I'm going to home in on that most people know and will play is Call of Cthulhu. Because if you put a miniature down of a thing in Call of Cthulhu, your players will probably burst out laughing. and say, what the hell is that? That just looks like a traffic cone with tentacles. Like, that's not scary.
Well, it is a traffic cone with tentacles, but it's like giving stats to gods, right? This is one of the cases where if you put a miniature down, the thought is, and this is not always the case, that you should be able to beat that, right? And this is a misconception by a lot of players that GMs will always produce an encounter you should be able to win. Now, I think all encounters have a slimmest margin of being able to win, but there is there's like a good percentage where like, no, you're supposed to get beat and run the way. So like, that's where you can see this, like, it just depends on how, but with Call of Cthulhu specifically, like, no, you're not supposed to fight the monsters. Like, you're going to fight the monsters, but you're going to lose. Yeah. So maybe, just maybe, I mean, you can really do it up and make it look interesting, but I think there's just, you know, look at each one. I mean, there's systems that are designed for it. Those systems usually have those rules built in. Yeah. Maybe you change those rules to make it more fitting to what you want to do. But those are generally the ones I would say, like Wraith with miniatures. Like, I know.
No, not at all.
No. I could see Vampire. Yeah. There's a case for Vampire, but Wraith, no. Changeling, no.
Just people stood around in a room. There are certain systems, as you say, nailed on for it. D&D is, Savage Worlds is, the Warhammer systems, both Soulbound and Wrath and Glory. Come on, that's what they want to sell you. That's what it works. You can play a very good skirmish game using Soulbound. But yeah, Wraith, no. If you want to do monsters and Call of Cthulhu, there are, again, good board games to play. Go play Mansions of Madness. Go play something like that. The RPG will not benefit from having miniatures, because when you're exploring a library, does the GM need to, make a model of a library when you're walking around Innsmouth? I mean, if you walk into a room and someone's got a fully sculpted Innsmouth with a smoke machine, I'm sure that would be amazing. All you do is go to the hotel.
Right. I go to the coffee shop to interview somebody, then I go to the library to read a book. Yeah. Like, what are you going to encounter? Like a fish person? Like
some guy.
You're going to open a door and there's just going to be a fully sculpted miniature of people, of someone fucking a fish person. Like, like what, like, what are you going to do with Innsmouth? I don't know. I think that you can kind of tell by the genre what's like.
100%. Yeah.
Like Cyberpunk is perfect for it.
Cyberpunk is perfect for it. I think if you can easily find miniatures for it, that's a good sign.
Yes.
Like, if you're playing hard sci-fi, brilliant. If you're playing Star Wars, no problem. If you're playing Good Society, which is a Jane Austen era social RPG, you're going to have a harder time finding miniatures of Elizabeth Bennet and Kitty Bennet and stuff. Great game, by the way.
Yeah.
But you don't need miniatures for it. Or Brindlewood Bay, you were talking about last.
Right, Brindlewood Bay. Yeah, you would not use miniatures for Brindlewood Bay. Yeah. I think the only exception to that rule would be Call of Cthulhu, because you can find lots of Lovecraftian horrors as miniatures.
That's true. Or plushy toys.
Plushy toys, yeah. You can put your plushy Cthulhu on the table. No.
Guys, you get Munchkin Cthulhu and your plushy Cthulhu and Pride and Prejudice and Cthulhu book.
I'm getting a little indigestion. I might throw up in my ass a little bit. Anyway, and then finally, Tin Man Prime. He says, I don't really think I'm the target audience, but what about remote only gaming and virtual tabletops, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that every topic is for everybody. I mean, just at least listen along. But I think virtual tabletops sort of, most of the rules we've talked about sort of work in their resource packs to kind of do these things, right? Yeah. But just take the grid, just turn the grid off. Just turn the grid off and you're good.
Totally agree. I don't, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big miniature person. I have used them a bit more online using, I use Owlbear, is it called Owlbear Weasel? Or is
Mm.
that the magazine? Owlbear Rodeo, which is a completely free online tabletop simulator thing. It's very basic, very simple, and that uses tokens and maps that you can gather from Reddit. If you go to our battle maps, you can pull any amount of maps in there. And that did help because it is just a case of put a token down, you're stood about here, put a token down for them, you're stood about there. I think they're useful. I think virtually they are good because it's even harder to get across
Right.
a description online. As
Yeah.
you say, you can't pull out that bit of A4 and go, no, when I say canteen, this is what I mean. When I say
Right.
the high school cafeteria, this is what I mean, because you have to open a whiteboard and then start drawing it on paint, and
Yeah.
it's
At least, the GM should at least maybe share their screen with a map, right? Because it's just going to be so. I mean, yes, you can do theater of the mind, and we did it for years and years. But like, there's something about having that map. And here's a secret: if you just type in plans for airport, you can find hundreds of airport plans you can just drop right in. You can make, those really tactical games, like those cyberpunk games, like where most of the work is like, we're going to do a heist, like just dropping like those cool plans in can really, really make a difference. And then having showing like, okay, here's the mech going across this, the full cyborg conversion like shows up, and it's this giant like image of this half cyborg man. Like, you go, oh shit, right? And it's basically free because you can go just steal a bunch of JPEGs. Like,
and yeah, to use that example, you could take a snapshot of Google Earth and just say, because with that you don't have to be explicit. You can draw a picture. You can have a picture of a all American town and say the mech is now stomping down Main Street, and you put
right.
the little picture of the mech down. It's where on Main Street it is. Is it between the corner bar and the mini mart? It doesn't matter. Just as long as you've said it, and the players can keep looking at that and going, okay, it's Main Street. They can start riffing off that. They don't need to know exactly where it is, but it helps in that way. And I think virtually, there is that extra level of just helps get everyone on the same level.
And the downside, of course, is some of these things are notoriously somewhat finicky in getting set up. So it does take, there is some overhead to that. But I think just getting that picture up there of a map is worth the heartache to try and get there. Tokens, there's some debate whether that, but I think it can be helpful to be like, okay, and you're here. It's like throwing the pennies on the board, right? So,
Yeah, 100%.
So,
and if you're stealing other people's artwork to make tokens, credit them.
Right, of course. Don't just. I mean, don't sell other people's artwork.
No,
clearly not. But if somebody asks, where did you get that? Like, it's from here, right? So, we here at Fullmetalrpg believe in crediting artists and paying them, if possible, right?
Yeah. 100%.
So, okay, we had some incredible points from our patrons. I think we have time here to maybe do a short RPG picks, Rob.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick something I just picked up, and it's called 2400. This is the thing I just found on itch. And it's basically like this, like, it was an interview on the Bastion Lands podcast with the designer, and he also did a game called Agents of ODD, which is basically like the like, it's supposed to be like BPRD or X-Files or whatever, but he did this he tried to run Mothership and kind of got caught up. It didn't really work for him, so he wrote this game called 2400, and it's these almost vignette games of, like, if you're doing space truckers, like, this is the 2 pages to do space truckers, like prompts, and then how to build some space truckers things. And then you could be like, oh, well, we've landed on a planet and now we'll play the horror version. It's sort of like almost, it could be chapters in the same book, but they're 2 pages. So one half of one page is an image of the cover, right? So, but it's brilliant. It's a little, I mean, I'm going to read some more. I'm going to try to see if I can just throw up a quick session of it sometime, but it's a beautiful little game. I just want to highlight off of itch.io, 2400. Yeah. So
fantastic. I'm going to also pick something off itch. 2 things actually very quickly. One is there's a brilliant bundle on itch.io at the moment, which is raising money for trans rights in Texas. $5, something like 150 games.
Oh, it's like 400 games now.
Right. Yeah.
It's that's one of those things about those itch. And I, of course, I already got it. I gave them like $25 or whatever. Yeah. Like, cause clearly anybody that tells on a trans person should get the sword. So we're going to, we're going to try and defend, that population. So I fully endorse this. There's some really cool stuff in there. Really brilliant games that there's so many of them. It's hard to find, but
you'll find something to play. They might not all need miniatures. The one that I am picking though is from itch.io, and it's a famous one that I have never encountered before because it turns out I had my head under a rock for a long time. Sword and Backpack RPG. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't heard of this. What is this?
This is part of what's kind of half known as the free Kriegspiel revolution of games, almost like an offshoot of OSR.
I need to have a discussion with somebody about free Kriegspiel.
I think we should do this because it's something I'm hitting now. I'm like, this is brilliant, insanely rules light. Literally, if you want to do something in this game, the GM will say, I think you've got X chance of doing this. Roll a d20. Yeah, you did it, or no, you didn't. That's it. Between you talk about it. You say, a warrior hitting an orc needs a 7 on the d20. A rogue needs a 10. That's it. And it all changes depending on how you role play. That's it. Sword and Backpack is a brilliant, almost codified version of it where you get 8 small pages which you are meant to stick into a little journal to make your own adventure manual that you can then write all over. That's it. $5, worth it. And looking at that thinking that is perfect for online play. I'm stuck online playing the most minimal amount of rules. Sounds perfect. So Sword and Backpack RPG is what I'm doing.
And I'll link all these in the show notes. So just go to down below or the show notes and you click on these. Because that sounds awesome because and maybe just gets rid of the little stank off the OSR, but that's a discussion I think for another couple of people that may or may not ever.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, one of the shining lights of the it's known is a bit of a nuts anti-black sky. So that's it. But as always, like black metal, always check people that you're giving money to before you spend it.
Right. Yeah. Maybe do some Google searches. If you're not getting it from a recommended source, like we try and
Sword and Backpack, the guy who written that solid person, right. So no problem with that.
Okay, so that is fantastic picks. So I want to talk about Patreon. I mean, I know I talked about it a little bit before. I paused it for March because I only got the one episode at the very end of February, but it still will make me a day if you join so that we can kind of burst into April and get a little bit of that momentum going again. And it really helps. I've got a surprise in the works that will finally happen after many years. And because I have the control of all of the necessary IP and or funds to do so. So if you become a patron in April, you might find something interesting in your mail. So,
can I just check? Is it a Bucky O'Hare RPG?
No, it is not a Bucky O'Hare RPG. That's an interesting idea. I don't have the IP. I have the Fullmetalrpg IP is what I've got.
Not the Bucky O'Hare.
If I had that, we would be discussing the Bucky O'Hare miniatures game that I would want to, because that's what I'd want to put on Kickstarter, right? Because that would just go gangbusters is doing that, right?
Absolutely.
No, I have yes, it's a project and I'm very close. It will take a little while for it to occur. So, but just get on board with Patreon. Come hang with this on the Discord, like contribute to these Patreon prompts. Like it was really fun to go through those and they're smarter than we are. So it made this way better.
Yeah, they're great. Like miniatures, they spark inspiration.
Right, exactly. Also, we still are selling t-shirts, and there's a limited edition Wolfmungus t-shirt that is one of my favorite t-shirts of all time. Still on sale till the end of March, so get it while you can. I've got my RoboCop logo t-shirt that I'm wearing currently. That's also on there. Yeah, I wish I could sell it for $1, but
yeah,
just go to the fullmetalrpg.com to like look into all the links to the merch, and that t-shirt site, they sell for half price like all the time. So like wait till it's on sale. Like I get a little bit less, but totally that's what they're really worth. So buy them on sale. You heard it from Uncle Buzzkill himself.
Uncle Buzzkill himself.
So Rob, I really appreciate you coming on at such a late time over there.
Yeah, well, Match of the Day's on in a minute, so you are very lucky to have me.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to the next episode of Realm of Fire. The only Warhammer podcast you need no other Warhammer podcasts.
Yeah. Brendan's second favorite Warhammer podcast.
His least worst Warhammer podcast that he likes.
He's not dead.
He's not dead. He's clearly not a simulacrum done in Adobe Studio or anything like that. So
no, he's fine.
He's fine. Fine.
He's like Luke in The Mandalorian. He can only do certain things from behind.
Deep fake Brendan.
Fake Brendan.
I think that might be the Realm of Fire title. Yeah. Deep fake rap guy. Okay. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good night. Rah!